Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 17 Beta 8 and iOS 17 Public Beta 6 have been out for a few days, and there's even more to talk about as far as features and changes since the initial iOS 17 Beta 8 is out. What's new video. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the overall experience as I've been using it full time on my 14 Pro Max and iPad Pro, and we'll talk about your experience based off the YouTube community poll, where again this week there's an amazing 33,000 votes at the time of this video and 207 comments. I've read all of those comments to get the best understanding of what this update's like. We'll talk about some of those comments at the end of the video. Now, first, let's talk about news, then we'll talk about new features. Now, Apple has invited researchers to actually apply for their Apple Security Research Device Program. This is something that they've offered here and there, and you'll see they're accepting applications up until October 31st, 2023. So you can apply and then help Apple figure out what vulnerabilities are there so that they can patch them in future security updates. So you can see all of the eligibility. I'll link this in the description if you're interested and wasn't aware of this, but this is available now. Now, Apple Movie Trailers is an app we've had for quite some time on Apple TV and elsewhere, and it's no longer there. Apple has since replaced that, and under Store, you'll see Watch the Latest Trailers, movies and TV trailers. So you can see that now in the TV app. They've moved it here instead of having its own dedicated app this time around. This past week, there was a big update for WhatsApp if you're using the Mac app. It gained group calling. So whether you're in a meeting or maybe visiting with family and friends, you can now use it with group calling around the world. So that's a nice update, and if you haven't updated and installed that already, be sure to do that. Now, this past week, Apple released a lot of different updates. iOS 17 Beta 8, iPadOS 17 Beta 8, the Watch update, HomePod, tvOS, Mac updates, and they also released AirPods updates. Now, I didn't do a firmware update video on this one as I wasn't able to find a whole lot of significant here, but I thought we'd cover it briefly. If we go into Settings, go to our AirPods, scroll to the bottom, you'll see the latest firmware version is 6A299B. Now, some people are saying it's only for AirPods Pro 2 this time around. Usually they release it for everything, but this time around it's 6A299B, and if we go into that, the case is 60.55.0. It updated on its own very quickly for me, so just place it near your phone if you have the beta enabled, and it should update. Shouldn't be an issue as far as that goes. Now, we will take a look at things such as battery health and much more. Let's just take a quick look here, and then we'll go back and talk about this a little bit later. But I'm still at 89%. I've also showed you how to check that in a different way in the support app where you can go in and check that. So if you go into support, if you haven't seen the other videos already, I just wanted to share it. Go into your devices here. So 14 Pro Max, repairs and physical damage, then also go into battery service, and then check now. It will sort of check the battery in real time to give you what its percentage is. Then it actually makes sure it can provide the voltage. So you'll see it gives the same results, 89%, and it talks about what that means and how that works. So just wanted to make you aware if you weren't already. Now, this past week, Apple released macOS 14 Sonoma Beta 8. I did a separate video on that, and there were over 100 new wallpaper in that update. So 100 more wallpaper than we had in Beta 7. More motion wallpaper, more regular wallpaper, and I really wish Apple would add that to iOS. Maybe they will in future updates, maybe with the release candidate or possibly another beta, but at this point, it seems like they abandoned a lot of wallpaper on iOS, but maybe with live wallpaper, they've been working on that and the other features. I would love to see a ton of different wallpaper, plus a catalog of maybe past wallpapers, all the way back to the original iOS or iPhone OS. So maybe with the next update, we'll have to wait and see, but it does seem they are taking a lot of time for those nice new wallpapers, so they could make their way to the iOS updates as well. Now let's go over a few new features, then we'll talk about the iPhone event that's coming up very soon, and much more in the overall experience. Now there's a couple changes I wanted to go over. One of them has to do with the health section. Now I talked about this before with mental well-being. If you go to Browse, Mental Well-being, and then you go to Log a State of Mind, they've changed the ring rate. Now that was pretty minor and it's pretty hard to notice, but it is a change. So we'll go there on Beta 7 here that I have in my left hand. Mental well-being, state of mind, log, and then we'll just go to next so I can show you the rate of these rings is different. I showed that in my previous video. Something else that's different, not necessarily significant, but if we scroll down, they've changed some of the images that we have for about mental well-being. If we scroll down again, learning about mental health, the difference between emotion and mood, common concerns about mental health. So they've updated this a little bit, making the section a little different with some more information. If we go into music, there's a slight change here with the scrubber bar. Many people saw it disappear in previous betas. It was brought back with beta 7, even in the control center. So if you're playing music, it's there. You can scrub through your music everywhere, no matter where you're at, whether it's here, the lock screen, and elsewhere. Also, one thing I wanted to mention is when you're in music and maybe you're turning up the volume or turning it down, this seems to have more inertia and is a little bit more animated this time around. So very small visual changes, but things they continue to refine. The same is true in the control center here as well. When you slide up and down the volume, they made this change before. So it's a nice little change there. If we go into the control center and maybe we're using Shazam, I've talked about how we had a different animation for this before, but we also have a different graphic going on within the S for Shazam up in the dynamic island. It's animated now and you can see what it looks like. So it's just got a really nice look to it, and they continue to refine the interface overall. Also, one thing I wanted to mention is how smooth the overall interface has been on iPad. Within Messages, if we tap on the plus button on the iPad, you'll see it's super smooth as far as the overall animations. Tap on stickers, it expands. If we tap back, go back to the plus, there's a little hiccup there, but if we tap on stickers again, drag and drop, we can do that simply, and it's very smooth and animates really nicely. So the overall experience definitely is improving and getting much, much better. Also, I wanted to mention the silent switch. The haptics seem to be stronger this time around. There's 3 very pronounced taps when you're using it, and it seems to be very noticeable now compared to before. Some people are also experiencing haptics throughout the OS in random places. This could be a bug, or it could be Apple maybe getting ready to add haptics to more places throughout. Or they could just be trying to get the action button programming right for what we expect with the iPhone 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max or 15 Ultra. And speaking of that, the Apple event is only 10 days away. So on the 12th, we'll have the Apple event 10 days away from the time of posting this video. We'll have the Apple event on the 12th. We expect the pre-orders to go live on the 15th with a final release on the 22nd. I have a separate video going over everything to expect with that update. So I'm looking forward to it to see what Apple actually introduces. Maybe we'll get a few surprises. Also, the Pro Display XDR stand is out of stock, so maybe they're working on something new with that as well. Or maybe they're just done selling it. We don't really know, but lots to look forward to there. Of course, we'll hear more about that in iOS 17 at the event. Now, as far as one other thing I wanted to mention before we talk about the overall experience, many people have asked me to bring this up, and that's iOS 16.6, specifically a green screen issue. After people have updated to that version, some people are seeing a green screen. Now, I've had some people mention this to me. I haven't seen it myself. This iPhone's on iOS 16.6, but it's even on Apple's forums where there's 82 people saying me too with this problem. So it's definitely something people are experiencing. It could be the phone goes green, and then also go in and see what people are saying. Even my mobile iPhone 13 Pro Max turned green and white. So lots of people are seeing this. Apple has not offered a solution yet other than to replace the screen. So hopefully we see them fix this. And if I hear more and more about it, I'll make a separate video. Hopefully Apple is aware of this issue now and issues an iOS 16.6.1 or something else to fix this issue very, very quickly. Now, as far as the overall experience with iOS 17 Beta 8, I think it's got a lot of momentum and working really well for most people. It's getting very close to a final, and I think they're doing a great job. There's still some issues, but they're doing much better than the previous betas. I first wanted to start with the camera, though, and take a look at the comparison between Beta 7 and Beta 8. And honestly, I didn't notice much of a difference. It seems like they've adjusted the camera some from iOS 16, but now it seems to be more the same with iOS 17. The last few betas basically look the same. They're looking pretty good, as you can see here with a few different photos I've been showing. So I think it's doing better than it was with iOS 16. It's less sharp. It looks better. The overall algorithm when you're not using RAW seems to be better, and it just seems to be a better image overall. Hopefully they really get this right with the final release, though. As far as the overall use of this, connectivity is okay, but often stops playing music where it would normally just stream when I'm using CarPlay. So when I'm using this, playing music, I even have lossless turned on, or turned off rather, when I'm not on Wi-Fi, so it uses less data, and still it seems to disconnect. We didn't have a modem update from Beta 7 to Beta 8, but still it doesn't seem to be great sometimes. Sometimes that's carrier specific and even can be affected by weather and how many people are on the local cell tower, but it seems to be mostly good, but music streaming and CarPlay seems to be odd this time around. Now, as far as the release notes, let's take a look at that briefly. I wanted to show you a couple things that were fixed. Things with eSIM transfer, there's hundreds of changes and updates as far as fixes and resolved issues. So this time around, they've resolved an issue with eSIM transfer where they've fixed the eSIM transfer using transfer from nearby iPhone between devices using different iCloud accounts, or devices without an iCloud account might fail. They've fixed that. They've also fixed an issue with FaceTime where it says a black rectangle is shown behind the reaction picker while it is being animated. After animation completes, the picker has black corners. So they're fixing everything from little things like that to major issues with the eSIM. There's many, many things that have been fixed. So that's great to see, but there's still some bugs that remain. Most of them are cosmetic or just slowdowns, but there's still bugs that remain. In fact, the notification bug is still here. You may have already seen how slow that was with just scrolling down. It just sort of was really slow in animation, so that's kind of odd. Notification bugs are broken or still an issue here. There's also an issue that's been brought to my attention from Noah, a longtime viewer of the channel, and this is something you can easily repeat, and he also found the fix and reported it in feedback. So I would recommend you do the same, and he's been a longtime viewer, so thanks a lot for sending this in. If I pull down the notification shade or notifications, then go to the next page, do the same, you'll see there's frame rate lag. Do it again, it's very laggy. So if I go back and forth doing that, you'd think that'd be pretty simple and smooth, but it's not. The way to fix this is actually to go to your settings, then go to home screen and app library, and then in there, turn off the option for search to show on home screen. Do that, and it seems to fix this issue. It's fast, go to the next screen, fast again. This makes no sense that this would be fast, but it seems to fix the issue. So it has to do with something with search overall. Also, like I mentioned before, there's random vibrations throughout the OS. Again, this could be intentional. It probably isn't, but they're working on that. And there's also some reports of the phone being hot for no reason. Now, I have to say I had zero issues with this up until today. I went outside to take some photos for this video, and then it heated up really quite hot, surprisingly hot right around the processor. Now, I expect it to process photos and get a little bit warm, that's fine, but it was excessively hot. Now it's nice and cool again, so that was pretty random. Not sure why it did that. I'm not concerned, but it's definitely something that happens from time to time. Also, some people are saying that weather is not showing the right location when you have it set to location. Seems to be working fine for me, but some people aren't seeing that. And also some people are seeing slowdowns in camera as well. So if you're using the camera or photos, it's just being laggy. Also, shortcuts can act that way as well. Going into shortcuts, if you're editing it, going in, creating a new one, just create an action here from photos. And some people are just saying in general, this is very laggy. It hasn't been for me, but everyone's experience can vary a little bit. As far as performance, other than the odd lag here and there, it's been pretty good. ProMotion ramping up and down, I've seen some complaints about that. It seems to be okay for me. It does ramp up and down, but again, scrolling and swiping home sometimes is stuttery again for some reason. That shouldn't happen, but opening apps, that sort of performance seems to be fine. It's just sort of scrolling, and when it spins up that ProMotion, I think that it gets a little bit slow. Also, it seems to be mostly good as far as frame rate drops and playing games. Many have asked me to share this on the iPhone 11 since it's a little bit older, and I did notice it was a little bit slower with Beta 8 from time to time. Whether that's going into music or just scrolling in general, this is okay, but sometimes going back and forth, scrolling through the app library, I've seen it lag a little bit. If we go into Minecraft, we'll let this load and see if we get frame rate lag once the game loads. And now it's loading pretty quickly. It says loading resources. We should be into the game in just a second, although this part is taking a little bit longer than I remember. And there we go. Now we're in. So if we move about here, let's see what the frame rate's like. I'd say that's as good as last week when I checked it out on Beta 7. Seems to be pretty good overall. Nice and smooth there. So playing games, I really haven't heard a complaint. Scrolling or swiping home, that was a little bit laggy as far as frame rate. So they have some optimization to do for the performance overall. As far as overall heat, well, like I said, it heated up randomly, but most of the time it's nice and cool. Let's take a look with the thermal camera. And if I bring the thermal camera over the hottest point, we've got about 87 degrees Fahrenheit. And as far as Celsius, we have about 31.9 or 32 degrees Celsius. So overall, it's doing pretty well. That's colder than it was last week at the same time, and the screen's been on this entire video, so it's staying nice and cool. Not really concerned, and most people say the same when it's charging. It's not overly hot like it had been for some people. Now, as far as battery life, we've talked about this in depth, but let's take a look. If we go over to battery health and charging, I'm at 89%. It's holding at 89% for a while at least. If we go to the last 10 days, it's been okay, but not great. 3 hours and 24 minutes of screen active time, 3 hours and 13 minutes of screen idle time yesterday. That's better than I'd say probably beta 7, but not great, and 2 hours and 22 minutes of screen active time with 75% usage. Now, that seems to be my case, as some other people are having pretty good battery life. So if we take a look at Nate's, who sent his battery life in, this is an iPhone 14 Pro Max with 99% battery health, and he had 7 hours and 55 minutes of screen active time with 100% usage. That's pretty good. He did charge it 100% before that, but in general, about 7 hours of screen on time and 75%. So about maybe 8. That's pretty typical for many people on iOS 16.6. So that's pretty good. That's great for him. I'm not really seeing the same battery life for some reason. So maybe I need to just reset my iPhone altogether and start over. And hopefully that will resolve the issue for me. As far as if you should install iOS 17 Beta 8, well, if you're already on the betas, of course, install the next version. The same is true with iOS 17 Public Beta 6. However, if you haven't tried them out yet and you're looking to fix bugs, I would wait for the final version. But if you want to try it out, you have a backup, you have a computer to downgrade if you need to, then go ahead and try it. It's very close to a final release, and we're getting close to what it should be like. Maybe we'll have a beta after this or a release candidate next. If we take a look at the calendar, we could have a beta this coming Tuesday. It's very unlikely at this point. Usually with this sort of setup, we'll have an RC after the event from Apple. So we won't probably have any betas this week. It's possible we could have a beta 9, but most likely they'll skip this week and then release the release candidate after the event on the 12th. Then typically we'll have a final release, usually the following Monday on the 18th. That's what Apple does usually year over year. Again, they can change this up every year. As far as iOS 16.7, I think that's needed if people are having that green screen issue more and more that I mentioned earlier. Hopefully we'll see that this week, but either way, usually the first week of September, we get some sort of iOS update for the previous version. So 16.7 RC could release, or we could just get a 16.6.1. We don't really know, but we have seen 16.7 in testing according to analytics on certain websites. So that seems to be doing pretty well that way. Hopefully we'll see that very, very soon to fix those issues, and hopefully it's not a hardware issue, that it's actually done something to it. Now, as far as what you had to say about the YouTube community poll, let's take a look at some of your comments. GS122809 said, iOS 17 Developer Beta 8 on an iPhone 13 Pro Max. All good so far. Battery life is good. As a blind user who uses VoiceOver using it on my daily driver, it's quite good. Masumali9100 said, iPhone XS on iOS 17 Public Beta 6. It is currently running decent, no lag so far, and everything seems alright except battery life is taking a hit. It's draining slightly more than it used to be. Other than that problem, everything else is good. Adam Tajyar says, I'm running iOS 17 Developer Beta 8, and so far this is the smoothest it's been. I haven't noticed any glitches since the latest update, probably because we are just a few weeks away from an RC and the iPhone launch as well. Battery life on the 14 Pro Max is still so-so, not terrible or great. This series of iPhone didn't have as good of battery life as the 13 series. Zomboy4313 said, using iOS 17 Beta 8 on my SE 2nd Gen, been amazing to use. I'm getting really good battery life and no bugs, other than the notification bug, which I hope they fix soon. Spacebar4946 said, iPhone XS iOS 17 Public Beta 6. No significant bugs that I have noticed. Seems to work better than iOS 16. Not looking forward to watchOS 10 though. Change for the sake of change. Going to be worse on battery. Give me my black theme back, please. I'd say watchOS 10 is pretty good overall. Other than getting used to the control center being a button and scrolling up, I think it's actually a really nice update. But overall, we'll have to wait and see. Many of the apps look pretty great though. The 8 Travel Girl said, iOS 17 Beta 8 is running smooth. No issues so far. No apps crashing, really like the last betas. Hopefully in the RC we can have new features. Martel Udell 2438 said, this is working so much better for me on my iPhone 14 Pro than iOS 16 ever did. I'm running the latest public beta. The only issue I have is with the screen sharing on FaceTime. I keep getting an error message saying, try again. Also, I'm blind and use VoiceOver. There are a few unlabeled buttons in the control center. For example, it says disabled instead of low power mode. Screen record says base state. So that's everything with iOS 17 Beta 8 and iOS 17 Public Beta 6. Not a huge update as far as features, but many bug fixes and changes, bringing us closer and closer to that final release. I'm looking forward to that, and of course that iPhone event. Let me know if you're picking up an iPhone 15 Pro, Pro Max, Plus, or regular iPhone 15 in the comments below, and of course I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do. If you haven't subscribed already though, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.